The alien ships arrived on a Tuesday morning, their massive hulls blocking out the sun as they moved into Earth's orbit. Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the space station New Seoul, watching the foreign vessels through the main viewing window. He had never seen anything like them before. The ships were smooth and white like giant eggs floating in space. "Sir, they're asking permission to dock," said Lieutenant So-young from her station. Hyunwoo nodded. "Give them docking bay 7, and tell the crew to stay calm." The aliens had been traveling for 3 months to reach Earth. They called themselves the Corvani, and they said they came in peace. Their leader was Ambassador Thelvak, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. When he walked into the station's main meeting room, Hyunwoo noticed how careful the alien was with his movements. "Greetings, Captain," Thelvak said through his translation device. His voice sounded like wind through metal tubes. "We come to welcome your species to the galactic community." Hyunwoo shook one of the alien's hands. It felt cold and smooth. "Welcome to New Seoul Station, Ambassador. We're honored by your visit." Thelvak looked around the room with his large, dark eyes. He seemed surprised by how simple everything looked. The walls were made of basic metal panels and the furniture was just plastic and steel. Not very impressive compared to alien technology. "We would like to conduct some tests," the ambassador said. "Standard procedures for new species. Nothing harmful, we promise." Over the next few days, the aliens tested everything they could. They measured human strength, speed, and intelligence. They studied human bones and muscles. They watched how humans work together and solve problems. Jaemin, the station's scientist, helped with the tests. He was curious about the aliens too, and he asked them many questions. "Your bones are quite thin," one alien doctor told Jaemin, "and your skin offers no protection from radiation or extreme temperatures. How do you survive in space?" "We build suits and ships to protect us," Jaemin answered. The alien looked confused. "But what if your equipment fails?" "Then we fix it," Jaemin said with a smile. The aliens tested human technology next. They looked at the space station systems, the defense ships, and the life support equipment. Everything seemed basic to them. Humans used simple metals and basic computers. Nothing was as advanced as Corvani technology. Commander So-young, who had been promoted to lead the military tests, watched the aliens examine human weapons. The energy rifles seemed like toys compared to alien guns. The human armor looked thin and weak next to alien battlesuits. "Your military equipment is interesting," Thelvak said politely. "Very creative use of limited resources." So-young felt insulted but kept her anger hidden. "It gets the job done." "I'm sure it does," the ambassador replied, but his tone suggested he didn't really believe it. The aliens spent a full week testing and measuring. They recorded everything in their computers and compared humans to other species in the galaxy. When they finished, Thelvak called a meeting with Earth's leaders. "We have completed our assessment," he announced to the crowded room. "Humanity shows great potential, but you are clearly a young and fragile species." The word fragile hung in the air like a bad smell. Captain Hyunwoo felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. "Your bones are weak, your skin is soft, and your technology is basic," Thelvak continued. "You cannot survive in most galactic environments without heavy protection. Therefore, we classify Earth as a protected developing world." "What does that mean?" asked General Dong-hyun, who had traveled up from Earth for the meeting. "It means you will be under our protection," the ambassador explained. "You will have a place in the Galactic Council, but as a junior member. We will help you develop slowly and safely. No dangerous missions or frontier assignments." The humans in the room looked at each other. They had dreamed of exploring the stars and meeting other species as equals. Instead, they were being treated like children who needed protection. "We appreciate your concern," Hyunwoo said carefully. "But humans are tougher than we might look." Thelvak made a sound that might have been laughter. "Captain, we have tested thousands of species. We know fragility when we see it. Humans break too easily. You need time to grow stronger before you can handle the dangers of space." "And if we refuse this protection?" So-young asked. The ambassador's expression became serious. "Then you would be on your own when the real dangers come. Trust me, Commander. There are things in the galaxy that would destroy your entire species without even noticing." Jaemin had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke up. "What kind of dangers?" "Ancient enemies that sleep between the stars," Thelvak said in a low voice. "Machine minds that eat entire worlds, beings of pure energy that turn planets into ash. These threats require strong species to face them. Humans are not ready for such battles. The room fell silent. Earth's leaders had known there might be dangers in space, but they hadn't imagined anything so terrible. So we accept your protection, General Dong-hyun said finally. For now. A wise choice, Thelvak nodded. We will assign you territory in the safe zones. Nice, quiet star systems where you can build colonies and learn. No one will bother you there. After the aliens left, the human leaders met privately. Everyone was angry and frustrated, but they didn't have much choice. Earth's weapons and ships were no match for Corvani technology. If they refused the offer, they would be completely alone. Fragile, So Young muttered. They think we're fragile. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Hyun-woo said thoughtfully. Let them think we're weak. It might be useful someday. Jaemin was already making plans. During the tests, he had learned a lot about alien technology. More importantly, he had seen how surprised the aliens were by human adaptability. They noticed how quickly humans learned to use alien equipment and adjust to new situations. But they thought it was just curiosity, not real capability. They're making a mistake, Jaemin said quietly. They're measuring us like we're just another alien species. But humans are different. We don't just adapt to new environments, we change them. As the Corvani ships disappeared into the darkness of space, the humans began making secret preparations. They accepted their role as a protected species publicly, but privately they started building better ships, stronger weapons, and new technologies that combined human creativity with alien science. They would show the galaxy what fragile really meant, and what it meant when humans decided to hold their ground. 6 months after the Corvani assessment, humanity received their assignment. They would colonize the Outer Rim territories, star systems that other alien species considered too dangerous or worthless to claim. Captain Minho looked at the star charts on his ship's main screen and smiled grimly. The aliens were sending humans to the worst places in the galaxy. Kepler 442c, he read aloud to his crew. Extreme temperature changes, toxic atmosphere, constant radiation storms. No wonder nobody wants it. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Ha-eun, studied the data more carefully. The radiation actually creates some interesting atmospheric effects. We could use that. Minho raised an eyebrow. Use deadly radiation? Only humans would think of that. Ha-eun was an engineer who specialized in terraforming. While other species built giant domed cities to hide from hostile environments, she preferred to work with planets rather than against them. The radiation ionizes certain gases in the atmosphere. If we can channel that energy, we could power our entire colony. The first transport ships arrived at Kepler 442c 3 weeks later. The planet looked angry from space, with swirling storms of green and purple gases covering most of the surface. Lightning flashed constantly through the thick atmosphere, and the temperature readings showed wild swings from freezing cold to burning hot. Other Galactic Council species would have built underground shelters and waited for the storms to pass. Instead, Ha-eun's team started building on the surface. They designed buildings that could bend with the wind instead of breaking. They created power collectors that turned lightning strikes into electricity. They built atmospheric processors that cleaned the air while using the planet's own chemistry. This is impossible, said Veltar, a Corvani observer who had come to check on human progress. He watched through his environmental suit as human workers installed equipment directly in the storm zones. No species builds in such conditions. We're not building despite the conditions, Ha-eun explained, adjusting her much lighter protective gear. We're building because of them. This planet gives us everything we need if we know how to ask for it. The alien looked confused. His species had rules for colonization that worked on every planet they had ever settled. But humans seemed to make up new rules for each world they encountered. News of human success on Kepler 442c spread through the Outer Rim. Other struggling colonies began asking for human advice. Captain Tae-hyun, commanding the Frontier Defense Fleet, found himself dealing with more and more alien visitors who wanted to learn human techniques. Your people are unusual, admitted Captain Zetheron of the Altari Defense Force. His species had been trying to establish a mining operation on a nearby asteroid field for 2 years with little success. How do you make these harsh worlds work for you? We don't fight the environment, Tae-hyun replied simply. We dance with it. The Altari captain didn't understand the metaphor, but he could see the results. Human colonies were growing faster than anyone had expected. More importantly, they were thriving in places where other species had failed completely. But success brought new problems. Taehyun's deep space monitoring stations began detecting strange energy signatures moving between star systems. The readings were unlike anything in the Galactic Council databases. Admiral Dong-hyun, now commanding all human frontier forces, studied the reports with growing concern. "They're big," reported Lieutenant Woo Jin from the sensor station. "Really big. And they're moving in a pattern like they're searching for something." "Searching for what?" Dong-hyun asked. "Inhabited systems, sir. They seem to be checking every star system that shows signs of technological civilization. The energy signatures belong to something the Galactic Council had hoped would stay asleep for another 1,000 years. The Devourers were ancient machines that had terrorized the galaxy, long before most current species had developed space travel. They consumed entire star systems, turning matter and energy into more machines to spread their hunger. When the Council leaders learned about the readings, panic spread through the inner systems. Emergency meetings were called. Ancient defense protocols were activated, and the order went out to all frontier colonies: evacuate immediately. All Council species are to withdraw to the inner defensive perimeter, the message stated. Abandon all territory beyond the safety line. This is not a request. Admiral Dong-hyun read the message 3 times before calling his staff together. The meeting room on the command ship was quiet as officers absorbed the news. "So they want us to run," said Captain Minho, who had been promoted to lead the Colonial Defense Forces. "They want everyone to run," Dong-hyun corrected. "The entire Outer Rim is being abandoned." "What about our colonies?" asked Ha-un. "We've spent months making these worlds livable. People have built homes here." Through the ship's windows they could see the lights of New Busan Station, humanity's largest frontier outpost. Thousands of humans lived and worked there, along with aliens from dozens of other species who had come to learn human techniques. "The Council thinks these worlds are expendable," Dong-hyun said quietly. "They're willing to sacrifice everything beyond the inner systems to save their core territories. And what do we think?" Taehyun asked. Dong-hyun looked around the room at his officers. They were all young, promoted quickly as humanity expanded into space. None of them had the decades of military experience that alien commanders possessed. But they had something else. They were human. "I think," Dong-hyun said slowly, "that we didn't come this far just to run at the first sign of trouble. The decision was put to Earth's government, but the answer came back quickly. Humanity would not abandon the frontier. They would maintain their positions and continue their expansion. If the Devourers wanted human territory, they would have to take it." News of humanity's decision shocked the Galactic Council. Ambassador Thelvac personally contacted Earth to express his concern. "You don't understand what you're facing," he said during the emergency communication. "The Devourers destroyed entire civilizations. They turned planets into raw materials for their machines. No single species can stand against them." "Then it's good we're not alone," Dong-hyun replied. "Half the Outer Rim colonies are choosing to stay and fight. They're following our example, because you've made them as foolish as you are." Thelvac's translator struggled with his emotional tone. "This is not bravery, Admiral. This is suicide." "Maybe," Dong-hyun admitted, "but it's our choice to make." As the Council fleets withdrew toward the inner systems, human forces moved to fill the gaps. They established new defensive positions and began building the equipment they would need for whatever was coming. Other species watched in amazement and horror as humanity dug in for a fight that military experts said they couldn't win. "They're insane," muttered Commander Kexlar of the retreating hegemony fleet. "Yes," agreed his tactical officer, "but they're also the only ones not running." In the deep space monitoring stations, the energy signatures continued to grow stronger. Whatever was coming, it was getting closer, and humanity was directly in its path. The first Devourer ships appeared at the edge of human space on a cold morning in December. They came out of the void like metal storms, their dark hulls absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Commander Sung-min watched them approach on his screens and felt his stomach drop. The ships were enormous, each one larger than New Busan Station. "How many?" he asked his sensor operator. 12 confirmed, sir. Possibly more behind them." Sung-min had been expecting this moment for weeks. The deep space monitors had tracked the Devourer advance as they consumed empty star systems, turning asteroids and dead planets into more ships. Now they had reached the edge of inhabited space and they were heading straight for human territory. "All stations, this is command," Sung-min announced over the communication system. "The Devourers have arrived, Execute Defensive Plan Alpha. Across the star system, human ships moved into position. The defensive grid that had taken months to build came alive with activity. Orbital platforms powered up their weapons. Asteroid fortresses activated their shields. Mobile fleets took their assigned positions between the enemy and the colonies below. The Devourers had expected to find empty space. For centuries, their advanced scouts had encountered the same pattern. When they appeared, intelligent species ran away. Star systems were abandoned, leaving behind empty worlds ready for harvesting. But this time was different. "Sir, they're scanning us," reported Lieutenant Ji-eun from her position on the orbital defense platform. "Multiple targeting beams." "Let them look," Sung-min replied grimly. "Maybe they'll learn something." The first Devourer harvester ship moved toward New Busan Station like a predator approaching prey. It was a kilometer long and covered with mechanical arms designed to strip apart space stations and consume the materials. As it closed the distance, its sensors detected something unexpected. The station wasn't trying to flee. Ji-eun commanded the defense platform's sole pride, one of 6 orbital fortresses protecting the station. Unlike alien defensive systems that relied on energy shields and evasive maneuvers, human defenses were built to take damage and keep fighting. The platforms were heavily armored and equipped with multiple backup systems. "Target the harvester ship," Ji-eun ordered. "All weapons, focused fire." The orbital platforms opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, missile volleys, and projectile cannons all struck the Devourer ship at once. The alien vessel's shields flared and sparked but held against the assault. "It's not working," her weapons officer reported. "Their shields are too strong." "Then we'll have to get creative," Ji-eun said. She had studied the intelligence reports about Devourer technology. The machines were incredibly advanced, but they followed predictable patterns. Target their shield generators with the mining lasers. The mining lasers were not military weapons. They were industrial tools designed to cut through asteroids, but they operated on different frequencies than normal weapons, and they were very good at cutting through tough materials. The focused beams struck the Devourer ship's shield generators and began burning through the protective barriers. Alarms sounded on the alien vessel as systems that had worked perfectly for millennia began to fail. On the command ship, Admiral Dong-hyun watched the battle unfold. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were adapting their tactics in real time. When their standard weapons failed, they used industrial equipment. When their ships were damaged, they cannibalized parts from destroyed vessels to keep fighting. Combat engineer Woo Jin was leading a boarding party onto a damaged Devourer scout ship. His team had trained for this moment, studying every piece of Devourer technology they could find. As they moved through the alien vessel's corridors, Woo Jin made an incredible discovery. "Sir, you need to see this," he reported over the radio. "I can interface directly with their systems." "What do you mean?" Dong-hyun asked. "My neural implant is connecting to their computers. It's like they're designed to work with biological minds. But no other species has the right brain structure." Woo Jin was wearing a standard human neural interface, a device that helped pilots control their ships. Most alien species use similar technology, but human brains were wired differently. The chaotic, adaptive nature of human thinking seemed to match the Devourer systems perfectly. "I'm downloading their tactical data," Woo Jin continued. "Sir, they have plans for the entire Outer Rim. They know where every colony is located. Can you disrupt their communications?" "Better than that. I can feed them false information." While Woo Jin worked to hack the Devourer network, the space battle continued around New Busan Station. Captain Ye-jin led a squadron of fighters against the harvester ships, using hit-and-run tactics that confused the mechanical minds. The Devourers were programmed to fight large fleets in organized formations, not swarms of small ships attacking from all directions. "They're trying to lock onto us with their targeting systems," Ye-jin reported as her fighter dove between 2 massive alien ships, "but we're too fast and too small." The human fighters were built for versatility, not specialization. They could function as interceptors, bombers, or reconnaissance craft depending on the mission. This flexibility allowed them to change roles during battle, something the Devourers couldn't predict or counter effectively. The turning point came when Woo Jin successfully planted a virus in the Devourer communication system. The alien ships began receiving conflicting orders, causing them to break formation and attack targets that didn't exist. "It's working," Ji-eun observed from her platform. "They're confused." "Press the advantage," Sung-min ordered. All ships coordinated assault on the main harvester. The human fleet converged on the largest Devourer ship, hitting it from multiple angles while it struggled with corrupted data. The mechanical giant, designed to consume entire worlds, found itself overwhelmed by a few dozen human vessels working together. When the harvester ship finally exploded, the smaller Devourer vessels retreated into the void. They had never encountered resistance like this before, and their programming couldn't process what had happened. The aftermath of the battle was sobering. 3 human ships had been destroyed, and 2 orbital platforms were heavily damaged. But they had won. The first direct confrontation between humanity and the Devourers had ended in human victory. Captain Ye Jin led the recovery operations, salvaging what they could from the destroyed Devourer ships. Instead of simply clearing the wreckage, human engineers began studying every piece of alien technology they could find. "We need to understand how they think," Ye Jin explained to her salvage teams. "Every battle teaches us something new about their weaknesses." News of the human victory spread quickly through Galactic Council space. Some alien leaders were amazed, others were skeptical. Many believed the victory was just luck, that humanity had simply faced a small scouting force. Ambassador Thelvak contacted Earth immediately after receiving the battle reports. "Congratulations on your survival," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased. "However, you have only faced their advanced scouts. The main Devourer fleet is still coming. How long do we have?" Admiral Dong Hyun asked. 6 months, perhaps less. When they arrive, you will face hundreds of ships, not a dozen. I urge you to reconsider evacuation. We'll be ready," Dong Hyun replied simply. "Admiral, please understand. The main fleet has world-killer ships, vessels that can crack planets open like eggs. Your orbital defenses won't stop them. Then we'll build better defenses." After the communication ended, Dong Hyun looked out at the wreckage floating near New Busan Station. Human work crews were already cutting apart the destroyed Devourer ships, learning from every piece of alien technology. The humans weren't just preparing for the next battle. They were evolving. The main Devourer fleet arrived exactly 6 months later, just as Ambassador Thelvak had predicted. General Seok Jin stood in the command center of Terra Nova Station and watched the sensors fill with enemy contacts. Hundreds of ships, some the size of small moons, materialized from the darkness between stars. "Count?" he asked his tactical officer. "Still counting, sir. Over 300 confirmed, more appearing every minute." Seokjin nodded calmly. The Galactic Council had established their final defensive line at the edge of core space, abandoning everything beyond the inner 30 systems. They expected the Devourers to sweep through human territory in days, maybe hours. But humanity hadn't spent 6 months just waiting. They had built a network of defenses that stretched across dozens of star systems. More importantly, they had convinced other species to stay and fight. "Sir, incoming message from the Altari fleet," his communications officer reported. "Put them through." Captain Zethron appeared on the main screen. His blue-scaled face showed determination mixed with fear. "General Seok Jin, the Altari Second Fleet is in position. We're ready to follow your lead." "Good to hear, Captain. Hold your position until I give the word." Other species had joined the defense line. The Vorthon mining guilds, the Kalari explorer fleets, even some rogue Corvani ships whose crews refused to abandon their frontier colonies. They formed a mixed force of volunteers who had chosen to fight rather than run. Dr. Insu, the chief research officer, had made breakthrough discoveries about Devourer psychology during the past months. His team had studied every piece of wreckage from the first battle, interviewed refugees from consumed worlds, and analyzed centuries of council records. "They don't just destroy," Insu explained to the senior staff. "They convert. Every world becomes part of their network. Every species they absorb adds to their collective knowledge. That's why running doesn't work long-term. So we make them choke on us," Seokjin said grimly. The siege of Terra Nova began at dawn. The massive Devourer fleet moved into the star system like a metal tide, their ships blotting out the stars. Leading the human defense was Admiral Kyung-ho, whose fleet had been reinforced with salvaged alien technology and new weapons designed specifically to fight the machines. "All ships, this is Admiral Kyung-ho," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Remember what we learned from the first battle? They expect us to break and run. Instead, we're going to break their expectations." The Devourer world killer ships opened fire first, launching energy beams that could melt continents. But the human defensive positions weren't built like traditional fortifications. Instead of trying to absorb the massive attacks, they were designed to redirect and dissipate the energy. Commander Yunji had developed the new tactical doctrine during months of simulation and testing. She called it human persistence tactics, a fighting style that emphasized endurance over firepower, adaptation over perfection. Don't try to match their strength, she had taught the fleet commanders. Outlast it. Human ships took terrible damage in the opening exchange, but they kept fighting. When their main weapons were destroyed, they used backup systems. When their backup systems failed, they improvised with whatever was available. Ships that should have been dead continued to fire makeshift weapons at the enemy. The Devourer minds programmed to fight conventional military forces couldn't understand what they were facing. Enemy ships that were clearly crippled continued to function. Defensive positions that should have been destroyed kept shooting. It was like fighting an opponent who refused to die. 3 days into the siege, Lieutenant Hyo-jun made the discovery that changed everything. He was leading a commando team aboard a damaged Devourer command ship when he found the central processing core. "Sir, I think I can reprogram this thing," he reported to Kyung-ho. "Reprogram it how?" "I don't fully understand how it works," Hyo-jun admitted. "But I can force it to accept human command protocols. It's like making it speak our language instead of trying to learn theirs." Other species would have spent years studying the alien technology, trying to understand every component before attempting to modify it. Humans took a different approach. They forced the technology to work for them, even if they didn't completely understand how. Hyo-jun's team connected human computer systems directly to the Devourer network, creating a hybrid interface that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. The captured command ship began transmitting false orders to other Devourer vessels, causing coordination failures throughout their fleet. "This is impossible," muttered Thelvak, who was monitoring the battle from his ship at the edge of the Council defense line. "No species can interface with Devourer technology like that." "Humans don't seem to care what's possible," his tactical officer observed. The battle raged for 3 weeks. Human ships, battered beyond recognition, held their positions through sheer stubbornness. They repaired damage during active combat, cannibalized destroyed vessels for spare parts, and adapted their tactics faster than the Devourer collective could respond. Captain Minho commanded a defense platform that had lost main power on day 5 of the siege. His crew rigged emergency generators to keep their weapons online, using power cables salvaged from destroyed fighters. When those generators failed, they connected the platform directly to a damaged transport ship, using its engines as a power source. "Sir, this platform isn't combat capable anymore," his chief engineer reported. "We're running on fumes and spare parts." "Are the weapons still firing?" Minho asked. "Yes, sir, but then we're still in the fight." The breakthrough came when Captain Ha-yun's engineering team successfully captured and reprogrammed 3 Devourer harvester ships. Instead of trying to understand the alien technology completely, they simply forced it to work within human parameters. "It's not elegant," Ha-un explained to the fleet commanders, "but it works. We're basically jury-rigging their systems to follow our commands." The captured ships turned their weapons on their former allies, causing chaos in the Devourer formation. More importantly, they provided Hyo-jun's cyber warfare teams with direct access to the enemy network. "We're not trying to shut them down," Hyo-jun explained as his fingers flew over the hybrid control systems. "We're making them think they're following orders while actually following ours." The Devourer fleet, which had operated as a perfect collective for millions of years, began to fracture. Ships received conflicting orders. Command hierarchies broke down. The mechanical precision that made them unstoppable became a weakness when humans introduced chaos into their systems. By the end of the 3rd week, the main Devourer force was in full retreat. They had never encountered an enemy that fought the way humans did, taking impossible damage and continuing to function, adapting faster than their systems could compensate, turning their own technology against them. "Impossible," Thelvak said again as he watched the Devourer fleet withdraw into deep space. They should have been completely destroyed. The human fleet was indeed destroyed, at least by conventional standards. Most ships were held together with emergency repairs and jury-rigged systems. The orbital platforms looked like floating scrapyards. By any reasonable measure, the human force had been annihilated, but they were still fighting. And that made all the difference. General Seok Jin surveyed the aftermath from his command center. The casualty reports were devastating. Thousands dead, entire fleets reduced to wreckage. But Terra Nova still existed. The human colonies were still there. The line had held. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Devourer ships. They want to join our fleet." Seokjin raised an eyebrow. Even now, humans continued to surprise him. They hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had converted some of them. "Accept their surrender," he ordered, "and get our engineers to figure out how to fix them properly. Something tells me we're going to need all the ships we can get." The final assault on the Devourer core ship came 6 months after the siege of Terra Nova. Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of the combined human-alien fleet, looking at the massive vessel that controlled the entire Devourer network. It was the size of a small planet, dark and threatening against the stars. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Junho," he announced to the assembled ships. "Today we end this war." The fleet around him was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside Altari cruisers, Forthon mining vessels, and even converted Devourer ships that had joined the human cause. It was a collection of survivors who had learned to fight together. Ambassador Thelvak, who had finally joined the fight after watching humanity's impossible victories, still couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Admiral," he said over the communication channel, "my tactical computers say this attack is suicide. That ship has been the Devourer command center for over 1,000,000 years. "Then it's time for a change," Junho replied simply. The battle plan had been developed by Captain Su Jin, whose cyber warfare division had been quietly studying the Devourer network for months. She had discovered something incredible. The machines didn't expect conquered territory to fight back. They assumed that once a system was taken, it stayed taken. Every world we retook, every ship we captured, every system we infected with human adaptability, it all created weak points in their network, Sujin explained to the fleet commanders. "The core ship has to use processing power to maintain control instead of expanding. We've given them a cancer they can't cure." The attack began with boarding parties led by Commander Byung-ho. His teams had trained for this moment, learning to fight inside Devourer ships using tactics no other species would attempt. They didn't try to understand the alien technology completely. Instead, they forced it to work for humanity. "Remember," Byung-ho told his troops as they prepared for insertion, "we're not trying to shut down their systems. We're making their systems work for us." The boarding pods launched from the human ships carrying teams of engineers, soldiers, and cyber warfare specialists deep into the core ship. The vessel was so large that it had its own gravity and atmosphere, like a mechanical world floating in space. Inside the ship, Byung-ho's teams moved through corridors that stretched for kilometers. The Devourer defenses were designed to stop energy weapons and explosives, not the improvised tools that humans preferred. When blast doors blocked their path, they used mining equipment to cut through. When security systems tried to stop them, they rewired the systems to ignore their presence. "Sir, we've reached the primary processing center," reported Sergeant Chang Min over the radio. "It's incredible. The whole room is filled with machines that think." The Devourer core was a vast chamber filled with mechanical brains that had been calculating for millions of years. These machines had conquered countless civilizations, absorbed infinite knowledge, and grown beyond the understanding of their original creators. But they had never encountered anything like human persistence. Sujin's cyber team connected their equipment to the core systems, not to destroy them, but to redirect them. They inserted human logic into the machine network, forcing the ancient computers to process concepts they had never been designed to handle. "We're not changing what they do," Sujin explained, as her fingers worked over the control interfaces. "We're changing why they do it." The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the galaxy, Devourer ships began receiving new orders. Orders to protect instead of consume, to build instead of destroy, to serve the species they had once hunted. The mechanical minds, programmed to follow commands without question, couldn't resist the human logic that had infected their network. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Junho watched as thousands of Devourer ships across the galaxy simply stopped their attacks. Some began defensive patrols around the worlds they had been trying to consume. Others started construction projects building space stations and orbital platforms using their incredible technology. "It's working," he said in amazement. "They're actually following our commands." The war's end came not with explosions or surrender ceremonies, but with a quiet transformation that spread across the entire galaxy. The Devourer fleet, which had terrorized civilizations for millions of years, became the galaxy's protectors almost overnight. Back on Earth, the celebration was muted. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but the cost had been enormous. Entire human worlds bore scars that would take generations to heal. Memorial walls listed millions of names: soldiers, engineers, colonists, and civilians who had died holding the line. Captain Chang Min, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, stood before the assembled alien leaders in the Great Chamber on the Council homeworld. The room was silent as he prepared to address species from across the galaxy. "Many of you believed humans were fragile," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "You thought our thin skin and weak bones made us unsuitable for the dangers of space." The alien representatives listened without interruption. They had all seen the battle reports, witnessed the impossible victories, watched as humanity achieved what their combined fleets could not. "But you misunderstood what fragility means," Changmin continued. "We break easily, yes, but we don't stay broken. We adapt, we repair, we continue. That's not fragility, that's resilience." He gestured to the viewing screens that showed images from the recent war. Human ships held together with spare parts and determination, soldiers fighting with improvised weapons, engineers jury-rigging alien technology to work in ways its creators never imagined. Other species design their technology to work perfectly under ideal conditions, Changmin said. Humans build things that work adequately under any conditions. When your perfect systems fail, our imperfect systems keep going. Ambassador Thelvak stood to respond. The proud Corvani leader looked older than he had a year ago, aged by the experience of watching his certainties crumble. "Representative Changmin," he said formally, "the Corvani Empire wishes to apologize for our initial assessment. We measured your species by our standards and found you wanting. We failed to understand that your standards were different, and in many ways superior." Around the chamber, other alien leaders nodded in agreement. They had learned hard lessons about the danger of underestimating humanity. "The question now," Thelvak continued, "is what role humanity will play in the galaxy's future." Changmin looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Species that had once looked down on humanity now watched him with respect and, in some cases, genuine fear. They had seen what humans could accomplish when they refused to give up. "We're going back to the frontier," he said simply. "The outer rim, the dangerous territories, the places where other species fear to go. That's where we belong. But why?" asked the representative from the hegemony worlds. "You've proven yourselves. You could claim any territory in council space." "Because someone has to hold the line," Changmin replied, "and humans are good at that." The Galactic Council voted unanimously to remove Earth from the Fragile Worlds classification. In its place, they created a new designation that had never been used before: Guardian Species Authorized for Frontier Defense. The ceremony was brief and formal, but the meaning was clear. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's first line of defense against whatever threats might emerge from the unknown regions of space. They would hold the line not because they were the strongest, but because they were the ones who wouldn't let it fall. Months later, human ships were again moving into the outer rim territories. But this time they weren't alone. Alien species who had learned human tactics joined them, along with converted devourer ships that now served as protectors instead of destroyers. Captain Minho, commanding the new frontier fleet, looked out at the star-filled void ahead of them. Somewhere in that darkness, new threats might be waiting. Ancient enemies might be stirring. Unknown dangers could be planning their next move. "All ships, this is Captain Minho," he announced to the fleet. "Take us to the edge of known space. We have a line to hold." The ships moved forward into the darkness, carrying with them the knowledge that had saved the galaxy. Sometimes the strongest defense isn't built from the hardest materials. Sometimes it's built from the refusal to break, the determination to adapt, and the simple human conviction that some things are worth protecting no matter the cost. Behind them, safe in the inner systems, billions of beings from hundreds of different species lived their lives in peace. They owed that peace to the humans who had chosen to stand firm when everyone else chose to run, who had learned to bend without breaking, and who had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to hold the line.